Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of council. I'm calling this open session meeting to order, and I'd like to remind everybody that our council is committed to conducting all business with respect and courtesy by everyone. And I'll ask you to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. Scugog is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. Today we acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic Indigenous connection to this land and recognize the contributions of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community, in particular, our province and country as a whole. Thank you. I have regrets from Councillor Watton. I'd ask now if there's a disclosure of pecuniary interest and nature thereof. Councillor Brown?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I own cannabis stocks, medical marijuana stocks, so I will recuse myself from any conversation.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So noted. Anyone else? Seeing none. Any announcements from Council? Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank our crossing guards today who were out there crossing our children in the bitter, bitter cold weather. Most of the schools were rather empty, but I would just like to extend our thanks for them being out there today.
That's great, thank you, yes. Anything else? I certainly want to thank all of council and staff for a very productive, hard-working couple of days last week, working on our strategic plan. I think it was very worthwhile, and everybody contributed wholesomely, so thank you very much to all. Delegations, I'd like to call on our friend Chief Kelly LaRocca, Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, and she is going to be doing a little bit of a history lesson for us, and also give us a smudging ceremony to start our inaugural meeting for 2019. Kelly?
Miigwech, Mayor Bobby Drew, and to all council, congratulations on your election. And thank you to the CAO and to the Director of Corporate Services for having me here as well.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to, if it's all right, I'll perform a smudge and then I'll talk about it a bit and let people know its significance and just maybe say a few words and hope for a really productive meeting and a great council session.
Thank you.
All right. Usually elders would perform the smudge ceremony. You would often see that from an Indigenous community, but really smudging is for anybody. It's medicine that grows out of the ground. It's Indigenous to our area where we live, and it's not solely an Indigenous activity. So I wanted to share that with all of you tonight, and really it's meant to clear the room of any bad or negative energy, and to try and set people's mind and hearts in a way that is good, where we can speak with our mind and hearts and get off our chest what needs getting off, but at the same time hopefully move forward if there's disagreement or contention, which often at our council table it happens, but this definitely helps, and I know when there's an absence of it, so I hope it's good for everybody. I just want to note that it is smoky. So we have the fire chief here if things get out of hand. But if anybody's allergic to smoke, just know there's no tobacco in this. It's untreated sage, so that's what's going to be burned. And if it gets crazy out of hand, I might bring it in the hallway, don't want anybody to be smoked out.
Chief LaRocca, can you tell us how to receive the smoke? If you did, I'm sorry, we didn't hear it, so.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So, I'm just gonna burn the sage to ask people to be here today with, clear intentions of goodness, really. Speaking words that are true. Each of us has our own opinions, our own ways of doing things, or seeing an issue, our own wants, quite frankly, but, what the smudge does is it seeks to, no worries. It seeks to, just remind people that, we're all the Creator or God's children. We're all born from the same place, really, even though we might come at it from different pathways. It's meant to remind us that we're all here for a common reason, that we're all human and we have to care about each other. Clearly, we care about the town, so that's why we're all here sharing in this meeting and supporting the council and the hard work that they do, and supporting you as the citizens, the people of the community who work and live here and provide us with such a rich community. Really. So I'm just going to smudge this feather first to make sure that it's clean, and then the tradition is that I would smudge myself before anybody else. So I put it over my head so that I have clear thoughts. I put it into my eyes so I see clearly. I breathe it in my nose and mouth so I speak clearly. I do it over my ears so I clean my ears in case I can't hear anybody as much as I should be. And breathe it in my mouth so that I speak the truth. And then I wash it over my body. So that's what it's about, really, is trying to release anything negative that was in your mind or in your body or your heart. So you come at an issue or speak to another person in a manner of respect. And so I'll just go around the room and basically smudge everybody in the room. I can just smudge you, you don't feel you have to stand up and do the whole thing. You like something, feel free. No pressure. I always tell invited guests that smudging is a secular activity, although many churches use it in their daily service, depending where they're located and who their congregation is made up of. And it's, again, it's really a tradition that is open to everybody. I'll just kind of wave it at you guys. Kind of learn.
Make sure you get the press.
Great, I think I'm going to bring this out. Normally you would let it burn out on its own, but there are exceptions to some rules when you've created a bonfire.
That's part of our
And note the chief went with her.
Thankfully, the chief helped me put that fire out. The theory in indigenous culture is that if the smoke billows like that, it means it's really, really needed. And, you know, I just want to say, maybe that's true. Our town has been through a lot, and election time is always really difficult. And, you know, as a First Nations leader of a small community, I always say, well, it's really hard. Sometimes you get feeling a bit down because all your cousins are mad at you, and, you know, your aunts and uncles are upset, and your neighbors don't like it or whatever decision you make. And so it can be very, very heavy and difficult. Thanks, Chief. Well done. And so it, again, it really helps to have that, but we always laugh, and some days that will happen at our council meeting, it'll just burn like a bonfire, and we're like, okay, something's really bad that needs clearing out, so it makes sense. And again, I want to say thanks for having me here, and I'd like to offer thanks on behalf of Scugog First Nation to the outgoing council, and I'd like to offer our congratulations to the incoming council and the mayor, Bobby Drew. You've all done a great job. It takes a lot of guts to stand up there and be elected and stand for elections for your people, for your community. And, you know, whether you ran and it didn't go the way you had expected, or it did, it takes a lot of courage and guts to do that. And I want to say thanks to everybody who does that work, because as a chief, I certainly understand how difficult it is. So, miigwech to all of you for taking, or miigwech means thank you. Thank you for taking care of this land that is so important to our people and to me. My parents worked in this town. They owned Native Focus, if you remember. And so I have a great affinity for Port Perry. I went to high school here, and probably went to school with a lot of your kids or family members. But I just want to say it's good to see you all and build the community we're building, and I think we've started off on the right foot. Thank you for having me to the council. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Chief, for coming and joining us tonight. It is an honor and a privilege to have you here to open our first meeting of 2019, and we all look forward to our two communities working together on these lands harmoniously. So thank you again, Miigwech.
Miigwech. Thanks everybody. I feel badly. I'd really like to stay for this meeting, actually, but I have a little 8-month guy at home, and he's just a little guy, so he's not well, unfortunately. He's got a bit of a cold, so I'm going to go take care of him, I think.
Yeah.
But I wish you a very good meeting,
Thank you very much.
and I hope that...
There's something very special about that ceremony. I get chills every time I've experienced it, and yes, I hope it's a blessing to all of this council and to this town.
Yes.
Again, miigwech.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everybody.
May I have a motion to receive the delegation by Chief Kelly LaRocca of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation? Councillor Roth, Councillor Guido, all those in favor? And that's carried. Our next delegation is Carmela Marshall from the Lake Ridge Citizens for Clean Water. Please come forward. You have 5 minutes. Welcome, Carmela.
Thank you.
You got the light, you know the drill.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. I would like to congratulate you on your positions and sincerely thank you for your dedication and service to the community. I am here this evening representing a local grassroots organization, Lakeridge Citizens for Clean Water. We originally organized in response to the fill dumping going on at the Lakeridge Road site back in 2010 and 2011. Since then, we have joined with over 20 other citizen groups and NGOs across Southern Ontario and created the Ontario Soil Regulation Task Force. I am one of the directors of that organization. We work at all levels of government to advocate for responsible and sustainable management of excess soils in Ontario. This slide before you is an aerial photograph of the Lakeridge site shortly after fill importation. It is important to note that this site was originally a rehabilitated gravel pit that was actually pictured on the MNR's website as an exemplary rehabilitation. This site is adjacent to the most sensitive land designation on the Oak Ridges Moraine, namely a natural core area, and it sits atop a highly vulnerable aquifer as shown on the next slide here. To give you a brief timeline of events, the company, Earthworks Industries, did receive a fill permit to fill the site in May of 2010, and securities were eventually given to the township in the order of $200,000. However, the agreement was never signed as the permit was revoked due to failed soil sample test results. And this agreement would have detailed how and when the securities were to be used and returned to Earthworks. Despite permit revocation, Earthworks continued to dump for approximately 6 months in contravention of Scugog's site alteration bylaw. The township had to get a court injunction in March of 2011 to get them to stop. And this same company was charged and convicted in 2015 for dumping contaminated fill on a farm in Peterborough in the summer of 2011. After the injunction, Earthworks then challenged the township regarding jurisdiction, claiming they were building an aerodrome and the bylaw did not apply to them. The township won that case as well in May of 2011. Testing was done on the fill in 2011 and 2012 in response to Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change orders on the site. There were many instances of fill exceeding acceptable soil standards. And this slide shows where the borehores were and the samples where they were taken on site, and the rectangles detail all the exceedances. And the cyanide exceedance shown here is just one example of the contaminants that were discovered. And it's important to note about the cyanide that it was detected in a downstream monitoring well. And although the levels do not exceed drinking water standards, the fact that cyanide is even detected in the groundwater is of concern. Late last year, we became aware of the owner's intent to proceed with a risk assessment for the site in anticipation of changing the land use to a residential land use. They submitted something called a pre-submission form for risk assessment. And we read the pre-submission form and discovered that further testing was actually done on the site, on the imported soils in September of 2016. And this slide illustrates an updated diagram indicating more areas of contamination. And neither LCCW nor the town were aware of these test results until late last week. And apologize for the messiness of this slide, but 19 more boreholes were advanced into the soil in 2016, and samples were taken at various depths. Of those 19 boreholes, approximately half had samples that showed significant contamination, and in fact, some of the highest levels to date. This slide lists the highest levels of contamination found for each contaminant of concern on site. I just put little stars on the left to indicate where the exceedances were from samples taken actually in 2016. And then I wrote in the MECP tables just to compare the standards to the middle column, which is what they actually measured. And I can talk more about that later if needed. So just to finish off, the staff report recommends returning the securities to the owner. Now, understanding that contaminated soil remains on the property and that the owners remain in contravention of past site alteration bylaws, and understanding that the township has used some of the securities already for testing on site, and that the township has just become aware of more soil test results that reveal significant exceedances, we recommend you use the securities to do your own testing of the fill to better understand the full scope of contamination on the site. And we also recommend your legal counsel be given the new information about the 2016 testing results so that both you and your legal counsel can make decisions or give advice regarding securities from a more informed position. And I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to also thank all the citizens who are here in support and who want to continue to be engaged and involved with regards to this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmela. Can I have a motion to receive the delegation? Councillor Kiesebrink, Councillor Guido. Questions or comments? And before you move on, I'd like you to considering this recent information, that we perhaps refer this back to staff for further investigation and a report. But perhaps we could move on to the report right now, and we could ask questions unless there's anything specifically for Ms. Marshall. Okay, with your indulgence, we'll move the report forward, which is 9.2.1 on page 42. Thank you, Carmela, for your delegation. Page 42. Okay, are there any questions or comments on the report and as a result of the delegation? If not, would somebody like to make a motion to refer it? Do you have a question, or are you going to refer?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to do both.
Okay,
I have a
please ask your question first.
Thank you. This would be a question for the director. The intention of taking a security deposit, I appreciate that back in 2010, no one was here to make that agreement. But is the purpose of this not to do the testing? Is that not why we have securities held back?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. All I have to go on about what the intentions of the security were was a draft agreement that was brought to council in September 2010. As far as I know, that agreement was never executed. And based on that, it was mainly for testing, but there's also a time limit to that. After the permit was expired, revoked, or that there would be some time that the security would have to come back afterwards. I think it talks about 90 days in the draft agreement. So it wasn't meant to be held forever,
But certainly if there's still questionable activity or testing that needs to be done, then that would be an appropriate use of the security?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, there's no activity happening on the site right now, other than investigations by the landowner. And I agree with the idea of taking some more time to investigate further now that we have additional information that we didn't have before, so I think that's a good recommendation.
And that additional information, is that the risk assessment that Ms. Marshall was referring to?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, the risk assessment hasn't started yet. They're doing just a first step, which is the pre-submission form, and it includes every investigation, every site characterization that has been done to date, including when that was done in 2016. This is the first time we've seen it.
Thank you.
I have a seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Kiesebrink. Any further questions? Councillor McDougall?
Question, if the landowner wasn't to proceed with changing the land use, would there be any requirement to do a risk assessment?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, sorry, did you say would there be a requirement to do a risk assessment?
Yeah.
Yes, if you change land use to a more stringent land use, and there's anything that exceeds the criteria from the Ministry of the Environment, then you do need to do, you either need to remove everything from the site that exceeds, or you need to do a risk assessment to show that you can redevelop the land, and there's no potential concerns with anybody on the site, no risks to them.
Further?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if they don't decide not to do anything with the site, can they leave the site as it is with no risk assessment?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, this one has been the Ministry of Environment has gotten involved in this site, and they might have orders that they can't leave it as it is. They might order them to do something, but other than that, there's no real mechanism for us to order them to do things.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so in referring this back to staff, this is something you can further investigate?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Coleman, the security is for 90 days, right? We're 90 days beyond holding the security, or how does that all sort itself out?
Through Madam Mayor to the councillor, that's what the draft agreement said. It talked about 90 days. There's legalities to that. It was never executed, so it's not 100% 90 days, but that's what the draft agreement said, yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so there is no financial obligation if we hold that money, we're fine to hold that money for another 90 days or month and a half, however long we like? Do we have to release the money at any particular time? Are we on a timeline?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, it has been 8 years already that we've held the money. There's sort of some legal questions that we have now. Now that we have some more information, we're talking to our lawyers, and we want some more time to try to get advice from them about the timeline.
No more questions? I have a question, Director Coleman. There's been talk of exceedances, and there's been talk about contaminated soil. What is the difference, and is this soil what is the level that we are at with this site? Is it exceedances?
To me, contaminated site is terminology that makes people feel that the entire site has very high levels of contaminants, and it's a real concern. I'm not saying there's no concerns with this site, but there has been a fair amount of testing done to date, and there is some levels of different parameters that exceed guidelines, but it's heterogeneous and it's pockets here and there. So I don't like using the term contaminated site because it causes alarm in people, whereas yes, there are concerns on the site, yes, there are exceedances, and those need to be addressed, but so I prefer talking about exceedances to contaminated sites.
Does the site exceed, or what has been tested, does it exceed Table 2 soil?
It does. Some of the testing did.
So exceedances of Table 2, is it?
Yes, so the last testing that was done in 2016, there was 19 boreholes and 32 samples, and 9 of the samples tested out of the 32 had one or more parameter that exceeded the Table 2 criteria, yes.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is that the release of security for 13471 Lake Ridge Road be referred back to staff for further investigation and report back to council by the end of April 2019. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carmela, again. So moving back to the agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're here for that particular item on the agenda, you're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to depart. So zip up those coats. We're now moving to the consent agenda, and we have a few items that have been removed from the agenda, and that is 9.1.5 by Councillor Guido, 9.2.1, that was just dealt with, and 9.2.2 by Councillor Ross, and 9.4, the BIA bylaw, by Councillor Guido. Are there any further items that you wish to discuss from the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll have a motion to approve recommendations under Section 9, consent agenda be approved, save and accept those items. All in favor, or you're making a motion? Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Ross. Any others? All those in favor? That's carried. We'll now move to 9.1.5. That's on page 38.
I believe that was,
Councilor Guido?
yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 41 of the minutes of the BIA, I would just like to, it's near the bottom of the minutes where it's referring to the cannabis discussion that occurred at the meeting, and the fact that the discussion regarding the cannabis survey resulted in the general consensus that no cannabis retail store be situated within the BIA of Port Perry area. I would like to ask my fellow Councillor Brown if he recalls the general consensus, because I do not recall there being a general consensus during that meeting, and I want to confirm with Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm not aware of any. There was not any discussion beyond your mention that there was a survey. There was no consensus that I was aware of.
I'll ask the clerk, what do we do in a case like this? These are the approved minutes. I think you received draft minutes. Is there a difference in the draft minutes and the approved?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Council, that is correct. The unapproved minutes that we received initially didn't have mention of the general consensus, and the approved minutes do now have them.
Have you got the minutes of their latest meeting? Was there a formal amendment made to the December 11th meeting?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Council, no, there was no formal amendment to those minutes that I have noted in the minutes.
So what do we do in a case like this, Mr. Clerk? Do we communicate with the BIA to point this situation out to them, or?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Council. Yes, we can certainly make note of what Councillor Guido has pointed out there and send that information back to the BIA. I would suggest in that case receiving the minutes subject to the amendment provided by Councillor Guido as discussed.
And then would Councillor Brown address this at the following BIA meeting? Is that?
Or would we send correspondence?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Council, I would suggest both. I will certainly forward the discussion that has been had here to the BIA, and Councillor Brown, I think it's appropriate to bring that up at the next BIA meeting as well.
That would probably be the one in March then, if February is their AGM, right? I don't think they approve, but yes, it'll be in March.
Would you like to make that motion then,
Yes.
Councillor Guido?
Yeah.
We got wording for that motion? Sorry. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, what I would suggest that the minutes be received, save and accept the discussion, the general consensus with regards to the cannabis discussion. And I don't have the page number, but I will add that as well.
41.
41 on our agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Seconder. Councillor Brown, do you want to second that motion? Okay. Everybody clear on the motion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Guido. Now we're moving to 9.2.2. And that is on page 47. Who brought that? Councillor McDougall, you brought that. Would you like to make the motion to put it on the floor?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like the motion to put that on the floor.
I'm sorry, is it 9.2? I'm sorry, it wasn't you, Councillor McDougall, it was Councillor Ross. Please go ahead. Would you make the motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to put that on the floor, please, Madam Mayor.
Okay, 9. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Guido? Your question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, a couple questions just directed at Director Heritage right now in regards to the mandatory sewage system maintenance program. In regards to this, I have been contacted by a number of people with just looking for clarification on the extent and the breadth of the sewage system. Just wanted to confirm that this is the Lake Simcoe watershed, which makes up a small portion of the township?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, it is a small portion of the township. Staff have estimated there are about 200 homes that are within this portion of the Simcoe, Lake Simcoe watershed, located within the township of Scugog.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Is there any indication that this program will be adopted more widely, including the Kawartha Conservation Authority, that will affect more of our residents?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, at this point in time, this is a mandatory program that's outlined in the Ontario Building Code for the Lake Simcoe watershed. At this point in time, we have no indication as to whether it will be expanded to the KRCA in Lake Scugog.
Lake
Thank you.
Simcoe is under the Lake Simcoe Protection Act, and that's why they have to do that.
Great.
Okay.
That's fine,
Anything
thank you.
further?
Nope, that's great, thank you.
Okay. We got a seconder. Any other questions? Councillor Brown?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Director Heritage, those 200 homes that you talk about, I guess they're looking at $170 or so to, and they don't have any choice, they have to pay it, is that correct? Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that's correct. That's what the Region of Durham Health Department, who will be administering this program, be charging to inspect these sewage systems. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think there has been plenty of notice because the Lake Simcoe Protection Act has been in place for quite some time, so for the most part, they should be aware that this is happening, and we don't have a choice. Councillor Kieserbrink?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So, the Township of Scugog will be required to prepay over a 4-month window the $17,000 in fees, and then those will be recollected from the constituents through the permitting. Is that correct?
Director Heritage?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that's correct.
Further? Okay. Anything else? Councillor McDougall?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Nick. Question is, I see in there the report of Phase 1 and a Phase 2. What is the time frame for that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to councillor. Timeframe, all inspections have to be completed by end of 2020 for Phase 1.
Further?
And through you, Madam Mayor, and then when does Phase 2 start, which I think is more, I want to say, invasive?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to councillor. Phase 2 is solely through the Regional Health Department. It's not mandated within the building code. Phase 2 is strictly for any repairs that have to be done, and it's a permitted process through the region.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so that would be unidentified properties only?
That's correct.
Very good, that's all, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Just for your information, the Lake Simcoe watershed is the very north and west portion of Lake Scugog, of Scugog Township, and it's actually a very small area, but apparently there's 200 properties there. Councillor McDougall?
Through you, Madam Mayor, are we one of the last areas in the Lake Simcoe watershed to complete this program?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm unaware if we're the last. I know that everybody throughout the province is mandated to be completed by end of year 2020.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. The BIA bylaw, and I must apologize, I would like to have 9.3.1 pulled, that's correspondence on page 65. And that is seeking support for the resolution to, about the GO Rail service extension to Bowmanville. Is there any questions on that? I'd like someone to make the motion that we support.
I'd like to make through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we endorse the correspondence for GO Transit extension to Bowmanville.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brown, questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. Sorry about that. So now we're on to 9.4, that is the BIA bylaw. And that is on page 71. Councillor Guido, you pulled that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, I pulled that, yes, and I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get used to this new technology here. Yes, so in respect to the proposed change to the selection for BIA board members, I have voiced my concerns earlier today with both yourself, the clerk, and the CAO, that I feel strongly that we need to allow our membership to have a say in who is representing them on the BIA board. I understand that there was reasoning to propose to make a change, but I feel very strongly that we need to continue to allow the membership to speak for themselves when it comes to their board representation. Everyone has the opportunity, or after today hopefully will have the opportunity to apply to be a board member, and it is up to them to make that decision to apply or not apply to be a member. So I would like to ask that we reconsider this bylaw proposal today, and I would also like to ask the clerk if he can advise on what the legal opinion was as to whether or not this falls in line with the Municipal Act, because there was some question as to whether this deviated from the Municipal Act.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Council. So I can confirm that the bylaw amendment before you today is in accordance with the Municipal Act. We did get, well before it was brought to Council, did get a legal opinion to that matter, to that effect, and I asked this exact question: is what is being proposed in accordance with the Municipal Act? And the legal opinion that I received was to say that yes, it was in accordance. Council do have the authority to change the composition.
I know. So just so everybody looks at the bylaw, the bylaw does not actually talk about the process. And I understand you have concerns about the process, Councillor Guido, but if you look at the bylaw, I mean, it's practically strictly from the Municipal Act. The only change is that previously we had 11 members altogether, 9 on the BIA and 2 councillors. So what we are actually changing in this bylaw is 8 directors and 1 council representative, making 9. So the bylaw itself is okay, I believe. But if we want to talk about the process, I certainly, we can discuss that. So are there any questions about Councillor Guido? Sorry, Councillor McDougall?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think we did strike out from the previous bylaw, directors shall be selected by a vote, was removed from the previous bylaw.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Council. That's correct. However, that's within the Municipal Act, so it essentially has no effect because it doesn't go away. It's still there. Within the Municipal Act, it says exactly that, and the Municipal Act overrides our bylaw, so it's still essentially in place.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, so I'm looking for a mover for the bylaw. We can discuss the process, but we have a mover to the bylaw. Councillor McDougall, Councillor Brown, all those in favor of the bylaw? The bylaw, not the process, the bylaw. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to ensure that a vote for the bylaw does not impact how the membership will be able to vote for their...
We can discuss that. I understand there's a resolution coming forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So it's just on the bylaw. Councillor Ross, do you have a question?
Just to clarify, we're speaking, do we have to speak to this before we speak to the process to make sure that it's...
Yeah,
yes,
because the process is entirely different, okay? All those in favor of the motion, approve the bylaw. Are you ready? Councillor Kiesebrink, you're reading it. Are you ready? All those in favor? 2, 3. Hands up again, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, thank you. That is carried. Okay, Councillor Brown, I understand that you have
Yes, I do. I'd like to bring forward a motion, Madam Mayor. I'm going to read it out.
Yes, please.
That the 2019 to 2022 Port Perry BIA Board of Management be selected by a vote of the membership of the Port Perry BIA for approval by council, subject to the following conditions being met. That confirmation be provided to council that all members of the Port Perry BIA have been notified of the election of the Port Perry BIA Board of Management at the annual general meeting of the BIA on February 12, 2019, and that all members of the BIA have been provided or will be provided a nomination package. That all members of the Port Perry BIA be provided the opportunity to nominate themselves or another member of the BIA at the annual general meeting on February 12th, 2019, and that the township be provided a list of the entire BIA membership with contact information for each member.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Guido. Would you like to speak to the motion, or let it stand as it may?
I'd be happy to speak to it, Madam Mayor.
Please go ahead.
So what we initially considered doing was we thought that it would be prudent for us, given that there have been some difficulties with the BIA, from my understanding, over the last 2 years anyway, that we would appoint directors to the BIA. Then we reconsidered and decided that what we should do is appoint directors to the BIA and let the BIA appoint some of those members. Today, upon consideration of any number of submissions from people, I presume business people in this area, we have decided that we will let the BIA, in essence, appoint its own directors, with the proviso that we will vet that. So we may decide, if, you bring 8 people forward, we may decide one of them we don't want on it. I hope that doesn't happen. So in essence, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, BIA, you can run your own show when it comes to directors. We hope that you choose the right people, and we look forward to those people that are being brought forth in the next month. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other questions or comments? I would just like to reiterate what Councillor Brown has said. We're looking for some positive changes. It's been a very difficult year with communications being very poor, and the relations have not been positive between the BIA and council, the BIA and staff, and the BIA and all of their members. It's our understanding from talking to some people today that the nomination form did not go out to everybody. It was hand-delivered to some businesses, and that that all members had not been notified of the annual general meeting. The communications has been very poor. A lot of the members of the BIA only heard about this action that we're taking tonight. They heard about it on the weekend or this morning. In fact, our clerk sent an email on December the 7th. It was not communicated. We asked the former BIA representative, Councillor Guido, to contact the BIA membership through her Constant Contact, which is basically the membership list. She had had her access denied. Councillor Brown has not got access yet. Our hands were tied as how we could, and another email was sent to the BIA and the President, on both occasions. Yet this action just became evident to some people today and on the weekend. This is unfortunate, and it's really not fair to all the members of the BIA. And we just want to improve things so that we can move ahead in harmony in this township. Because of all of those reasons, basically communication. We gave direction to our clerk and the CAO that this was something that we would like to move ahead with, and that was to appoint. I believe, and I think we believe, if we vote to support this resolution, that that if the communication goes out appropriately to all of the members of the BIA, and that we can get notification of that, and that we do get a list ourselves, because there are some times where we do need to communicate with the members of the BIA in case there's a misunderstanding. I think perhaps the process can go ahead as it always has. So I hope that answers a bunch of questions for everybody. I know some people that I talked to today that did not receive nomination forms and did not receive notification of the AGM are here tonight, and I hope that they are satisfied that if that is guaranteed, that things will move along smoothly, and then we'll have a good BIA set of directors, and we can move ahead and with harmony amongst all the groups and amongst council and the BIA. So that's my 2 cents worth. And if there are no further questions, Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few things on that. On the last recital of the draft resolution, it says that the township be provided a list of the entire BIA membership with contact information. How or when, or what is the timeline that we are expecting to receive that? I think that would be only fair to provide a timeline for this information to be given.
I think we could accept an electronic version of that, and I'm sure that could be done with a touch of a button, so I think perhaps by the end of this week, I think is reasonable. Do you think that that's a reasonable?
All I'm saying is I'm not sure if there's a compiled list, that's all. So I'm sure there is a list of contact information that they have, whether or not it's 100% accurate with business owners, building owners. It may not be a complete list.
It would be my expectation that we would take what is there, and then as it's being updated, we would be informed immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Is that agreeable to everybody? Anything else? Okay, all those in favor of that resolution? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, now where are we now? Okay, we are at 10.1, page 72, and that is the private recreational cannabis retail stores in Scugog. And Mr. Vertoli, this is your last day with us, and we're keeping you late. And so I will ask Rob to, Kevin. Rob is there, both of you. Do I have a motion on, or do you want to wait for some background? I'll ask for a motion. Do I have a motion on this item? The recommendation's there on 72, and we have an either-or. Is there a motion? Motion to receive. We have to make you do realize we have to make a decision today because the deadline is tomorrow. Do you still want to make a motion to receive? Pardon? No?
Sorry, motion to receive the report?
Okay, you realize that we do have to make a decision. Yes, go ahead.
So, essentially cannabis is already legalized, and we have to deal with the different challenges that will generate. Through you, Madam Mayor, to our planning department, I'm just wondering, there are communities that have opted out, like Mississauga, and then they prohibited people from lighting a joint in public spaces and parks. They've made a policy that they can only smoke on private properties. If we proceed and allow cannabis storefronts to operate in Scugog, does this preclude us from making policies to protect our public spaces and parks?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Those are two specific issues. One issue is dealing with storefronts and whether the township will elect to opt in or opt out of permitting storefronts within the municipality. The other issue, the second issue, is dealing with consumption and the consumption of cannabis within the municipality. The Region of Durham has prepared a revised smoking bylaw that includes vaping and the consumption of cannabis. And there are a number of restrictions that the region is proposing within that bylaw in terms of distances from public entrances and exits, dealing with municipal buildings, dealing with parks, dealing with schools. So that's being dealt with through the regional bylaw. The township has the ability to pass its own bylaw that could reinforce that bylaw, but we're currently reviewing that draft bylaw at this point in time.
Further? Okay. Anything else?
Madam Mayor, through you, just in further discussion to Councillor Kieserbrink's point, I feel that although we are dealing with the retail stores of cannabis tonight, when the regional smoke-free bylaw presents itself for us to speak to, that will be perhaps of greater importance and will touch base on many of the questions that the public is concerned about and members of council as well, as to the protection and safety of our citizens, including youth, and those who are choosing not to indulge in cannabis. So I would like to make it clear to the public that although cannabis retail stores are at issue right now, that people, as we speak, can receive cannabis legally through the mail, and that it is the smoking bylaw or the consumption bylaw coming forth that will have a greater impact in our community moving forward.
Thank you. I've been a little lenient here, but there is a motion on the table for receiving this report. I don't have a seconder yet. Okay, Councillor Kieserbrink. I would like to ask either our clerk or our CAO what it means if we do not deal with this tonight. What's the outfall of that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council should be advised that before you is a recommendation to either, of course, permit retail operation, retail sales, rather, of cannabis within the municipality, or to prohibit the retail sale of cannabis within the community. We are requesting council make a decision in this regard. A no decision in the eyes of the AGCO will be that they will take that as we have prohibited retail cannabis.
No, sorry.
I'm sorry, the province is...
The other way around?
The province is providing the option for you to prohibit. I'm sorry. The option is for you to prohibit, and if you do not prohibit, they will be seen to be approved.
So if we just receive this and don't make a decision tonight, that means that we are opting in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So on the motion to receive, Councillor Guido.
Just a question, Madam Mayor, procedurally. Are we not able to ask questions to the report unless we've decided if we want 3, 2, or 3? Is that procedurally what we're asking for?
You can ask questions of the report. This is very important. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I wasn't ready with my questions yet, but I will find them. First question, Director Heritage, is regarding the decision that we make tonight. How will that impact the edibles and consumables? Drinkables and edibles. If we decide to opt out, does that impact when the province opens up legislation for the consumables? Would that impact that decision?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Councillor, at this point in time, we're unaware as to whether it will impact that decision. We've actually posed that question to the province and haven't received a response to that question to date, as to whether it will impact. In most probably, it would impact it if we opted out. It could impact it, but municipalities have the ability, if they opt out, to opt in at a later date. but we're not, we wouldn't have the ability to acquire the additional funding that the province is providing municipalities that do opt in at this point in time.
But just to confirm, our municipality wouldn't even qualify in this first round because we have less than 50,000 population, is that correct?
That's correct. We wouldn't qualify in the first round, but in subsequent rounds, we don't know at this point in time.
And do we know when that subsequent round starts? Is there a date for when less than 50,000 population opens up?
My understanding through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, the first round will be completed towards the end of this year, and then the second round will open up. But in terms of the requirements or parameters associated with that second round, we don't know at this point in time.
Okay. And can you, through you, Madam Mayor, can you please walk me through how we will set a policy for our sensitive areas or our areas where we want to recommend, I know the province doesn't have to adhere to it, but recommend that we have the 150-meter distance?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, the purpose of the policy established, that could be established by council if we do opt in, is to protect the public interest, and the public interest in the Township of Scugog. And the province has identified, in conjunction with the federal government, 3 basic goals that turn on the public interest. One is protecting youth. It's actually in your report on the second page at the bottom under discussion. It's protecting youth, ensure public health and safety, and end the illegal sale of cannabis. So a municipality preparing a policy would have to focus on those 3 items or goals. What staff has done in this report has prepared a map that identifies the location of our open space areas or parks within Port Perry, the community facilities, municipal buildings, and used and the public schools and secondary schools, and have used a 150-meter separation distance and plotted those buffer areas around those facilities. And what it shows is that the downtown, basically for Port Perry, would be excluded from having cannabis retail storefronts. Now, the OLG would have to review the township's submission if a storefront was proposed within Long Queen Street in Port Perry. They're permitted anywhere where retail uses are permitted. Retail uses are permitted in the downtown area under bylaw 1414. So we would have to demonstrate to OLG that it's not in the public interest to permit such a facility in that location in Port Perry.
Thank you, Director Heritage. And just to confirm what you said, that the downtown would be in the zone to allow retail stores, or would not be?
The only parameter that's established by the province at this point in time is the 150-meter separation distance from schools. And the downtown area, based on that parameter, would be included.
It would be included.
Well, it would not be included in the separation distance. It would permit retail storefront cannabis facilities.
So that's where, through you, Madam Mayor, the municipal policy, if we were to put one in place with the sensitive area, would be Palmer Park, or where children, the library, that's where we would put in our parameters.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Kiesebrink?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Heritage. So just to clarify, so although we currently don't qualify because we are a municipality that is less than 50,000 people, the government has indicated that they're in 2-tier municipalities, that the funding would be shared between the lower municipality and the region. So that would mean that although in this first phase where stores are being allocated in some of the larger centers, it would not preclude us from being participatory in funding that would be forwarded to help establish the policies and things that have been discussed today. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that's correct. The province has allocated $30 million for all municipalities in the province. In the first allocation, every municipality will receive a certain amount based on the number of households that they have in the municipality. The township has received an amount slightly in excess of 11. If a municipality does not opt in, then they're eligible for an additional $5,000. However, if a municipality does opt in, they're eligible for a share of what's left in that $30 million pot. And there are a number of municipalities, as you know, that have opted out, so the pot is growing, so to speak.
So, through you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Heritage.
No pun intended, right? The pot is growing. So through you, Madam Mayor, to our director, so although we would not necessarily qualify for some of the initial retail outlets if we opt in, we will be participatory in the funding, which will then allow us, will fund the policies that we will need to make because cannabis is legal. So that will give us access to that funding, to that pot.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that's correct. To the what? Pot.
Councillor McDougall?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Heritage. The first question I have is if we receive the report and we don't opt in or opt out, and by default, we end up opted in tomorrow, do we still receive the funding?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that's my understanding.
Very good. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Heritage. Question with regards to the map that we see that shows, I think it's on page 88, and it's the map that shows where retail locations are potential. That map is proposed, the one that's before it is the one that is recognized by the province. The second map is what we'd like them to recognize. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that's correct. The first map just identifies the 150-meter separation distance from schools. The second map identifies all the other features that we could look at in terms of parks and schools and community centers and municipal buildings.
So through you, Madam Mayor, the second map is not binding with the province?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, no, it's not binding, but OLG would take it into consideration because that would be our argument in terms of defending the public interest in the township.
Further questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mother.
Through you, Madam Mayor, a question on page 77, it talks about a license holder to produce cannabis for commercial purposes, and it says is permitted to host a retail store within their site by their license, and then it says if the township prohibits sales in the rural or employment areas, this would not be permitted. This would not be permitted. Can you clarify if we? Well, one, that means that the growers are able to sell their product, and two, the question is if we prohibit the sales, does that mean they would not be allowed to sell, or they are allowed to sell?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, if we opt out or prohibit, they would not be allowed to sell.
One more question, Madam Mayor, thank you. To you, Director Heritage, the question is with regards to the proposed smoke-free bylaw drafted by the region, and it talks about events. Would the Santa Claus Parade be considered an event?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that's my understanding, the Santa Claus Parade would be an event.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Further?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so the province has outlined that the funding is to be used for the sole purpose of paying implementation costs, which include increased enforcement, response to public inquiries, paramedic and fire services, and bylaw and policy development. Whether we opt in or out, we're going to have all of those things to deal with. That's something to think about.
I agree.
Anything further? There's only one thing I'd like to point out in the report, and that is on page 80. It talks about the public survey. Just wanted to point out that hard copies, like, there was an online survey, but there were hard copies. There were pop-up places at, I think, some of the grocery stores, the library, and I know that some of us have taken them to different events that we've gone to, so seniors dinner and so on and so forth. So just wanted to make sure that we got all the demographics in the township, and I think we did a pretty good job. There was pretty good turnout. There was a pretty good feedback on this issue. So the motion is to receive it. If you choose to do something else, you can defeat this motion, and then another motion can be made. So, on the motion to receive, all those in favor? Against? Okay, so it's 2-2, against.
Madam Mayor, there's,
Just receive, she means.
yeah.
Just received.
We've just received, there's a recommendation that staff be directed to inform that we're opting in, point 2, or point 3, that staff be directed that we are opting out.
Right.
So are we ready to are we making that motion, Madam Mayor?
We're ready to make another motion. That motion was defeated. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I misunderstood. I thought we were separating out the motions, so...
Okay, no, the motion was to receive this report, period. So, everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a vote again. All those in favor of just receiving this report? Just receiving the report? Against? Okay, that motion is lost. Is there another motion to put on the floor?
2 or 3, pick one.
Councillor Ross.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to put a motion towards to permit the retail or the, to permit cannabis retail in Scugog.
Number 2.
Okay, that would be recommendation number 2, and I'll read it for the benefit of the audience here and the listening audience. That staff be directed to inform the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario that retail cannabis storefronts are permitted to operate within the Township of Scugog, and that such permission be subject to the following: that the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario be requested to directly notify the Township regarding all applications received for a private recreational cannabis retail store in Scugog and within 150 meters of the municipal border, and B, that the Director of Development Services or designate be delegated the authority to provide comments to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario on behalf of Council with respect to any storefront license application within the 15-day comment period based on the Council-approved locational guidelines that support the public interest in the Township of Scugog. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kieserbrink. Any questions or comments? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to speak as having made the motion. The original impetus from the federal government to push this through, to have cannabis legal throughout the country, was to make our country and our township a safer place by allowing unadulterated cannabis to be sold at a proper storefront. I feel that, as I've mentioned before, it's actually the smoking bylaw that will impact us far greater than this tonight. By allowing storefronts to have, and people to purchase cannabis through storefronts, we're allowing people to pick a safer choice, a regulated choice, over an alternative where they would have to look for another means of getting the cannabis. The interrelated goals set out by the provincial and federal governments are to protect youth, ensure public health and safety, and end the illegal sale of cannabis. Although this is not all going to happen overnight, I feel that the protection of youth is key, and we will continue to work ahead with bylaws and policy and procedure to protect our youth. But by banning storefronts, we're not doing that. As I mentioned before, cannabis is being sold right now and being delivered to houses, whether they're within 150 meters of a school or not. They're still being delivered there, and it's education that's going to be our greatest tool in ensuring a safe township moving forward.
Well said.
Thank you.
Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Brown, your conflict is noted. Thank you. We ready for the question? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. It was a very difficult situation to deal with. It's not something that I was very comfortable with, but it helps to keep our kids safe by allowing them to be bought under a regulated atmosphere. It's better than them getting it off the street that may or may not be contaminated. So thank you very much for that. The next item is item number 10.2. It's on page 95. Overt community grant application for the Lake Scugog Pond Hockey Charity event to be held on February the 2nd. Our grant committee is not up and running yet, and so this grant application is coming to us. Is there anything you'd like to add to this application? Any information you have for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Considering the past couple of years that I've been on this grants committee, we've received applications in December for the subsequent year, and due to the new advisory committee being chosen, the applicant came forward, but there was no committee to actually declare that this was a good grant. So coming to council tonight, it just ensures that this function can continue. And what they've asked for in the past, they asked similar last year, just to have the Latcham Center rental booking fee covered through this grant. So I do have that amount for council, and some of the other grant applications that have come forward, we would just, the applicant would put down a round number of $500. The grant committee would just actually approve the amount for the recovery of the cost of the rental. So the rental of Latcham Center for the day is $445.84.
$425? $445.84.
Correct.
Okay.
But if it please council, you could just say cover the cost of the Latcham Center booking.
Okay. Councilor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would, at an appropriate time, like to make that motion.
Go ahead, make it now.
Okay, then I will make the motion that we provide a grant to the Overt Pond Hockey Tournament in the amount to cover the rental for the Latcham Center.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilor Kesebrink? Second it? Okay, questions or comments? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. And now we have a notice of motion. Councilor Ross. Want to read your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to read the whole motion, I was going to speak to it.
Okay, go ahead.
Do I need to make the motion first? Okay.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, sorry, it's been moved and seconded by yourself and Councilor McDougall. So
Just to speak to it then?
wait.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I bring this motion to council to request that the region of Durham improve road safety on Island Road. As councillor for Scugog Island, Island Road is the one road that we all share. We travel it multiple times a day. And it's not a road that is just traveled on by residents of the community, but it's traveled on by a large proportion of visitors to the township, given that Great Blue Heron Casino and the future entertainment facilities are coming online as of Wednesday, I understand. And as a result, we have a lot of drivers on the road that aren't familiar with the road conditions, the type of road, the speeds, and the characteristics of the road. What is required that we're asking from the region is a holistic approach to the safety on this road. In the past, it's been a bit patchwork as far as looking at select areas. So the first part of the motion is to create a road safety plan moving forward for the island road, which will address all concerns from infrastructure, speed, and signage, and education to the public that move on that road. I'm not a planner, and I'm not, going to speculate as to what it should be, but a plan needs to be developed. The second part of this is more immediate in that there are two sections of road on Island Road that if that part of the road is closed, the island's out of business as far as no one's coming in or out of the island until those sections of the road are cleared and opened up. This has several implications that have been dealt with and spoken to in regards to the second access. Until the second access happens, these two portions of road between 7A and Head Road and Ma Browns Road and Pine Point Road need to be addressed so that we minimize the risk to the public, which is always our concern, but we need to minimize it more than the social implications of getting to your destination on time. It is widely held, and countless studies are out there, that speed kills, and by lowering the speed limit, you not only reduce the number of collisions, but you reduce the severity of the collision, which in part would lead to less closures due to severe traffic accidents in these two areas. So we ask that the speed be reduced. Again, I'm not a planner or an engineer, so I don't know what speed it should be. I leave it to the region and to the experts. But that the speed reduced in these vulnerable sections of Island Road and continuing with the second access.
Okay, thank you. Very well done. Excellent motion. Thank you for all the work you've put into it, and I'm sure that we'll all agree. I just have one thing that I'd like to mention, and I do this with all due respect. In the first paragraph after therefore be it resolved, you've identified specific roads, but you did mention that you kind of gave a little nudge to the region that they do it on a piecemeal. And I'm wondering if, and you say, that you, quite rightly so, we're not planners, we're not traffic specialists and stuff like that, and I'm wondering if what you say in the second paragraph actually covers some of those issues that you brought forward in the first paragraph, because you talk about speed, and you've got, in the third line from the bottom, this plan is to include road safety and traffic calming measures, including speed reduction, signage, and changes. So I wondered if you wanted to keep it as a holistic approach to the island and the traffic concerns that we have there, or whether you still want to leave in the paragraph 1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, just to clarify, paragraph 1 being the now therefore be it resolved that?
Yes. You've identified specific roads, but you wanted a holistic approach. And it's fine if you want to leave it in. I just was, that just came to mind when you said you wanted a holistic approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and correct me if I'm wrong if it doesn't read this way, the first paragraph, the now therefore be it resolved that, deals with the immediate concern of the speed limits between those two sections of road to minimize the risk, while the region deals with the second paragraph, which is the overall safety traffic plan.
Okay.
That was the impetus behind that, so that those two roads, which are a higher vulnerability due to, if they're closed, we're closed.
Yeah, okay,
idea.
well, that's fine.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other questions for the mover? No? Ready for the vote? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're finished, aren't we? The confirming bylaw. Confirm the proceedings of today's meeting. I know saving you for adjournment. Councillor McDougall, Councillor Ross on the confirming bylaw. All those in favor? And that's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Guido, Councillor Kiesebrink. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. It was a great meeting. Thank you very much.